Hello and welcome everyone. So my name is Hannah Cox and I'm the Executive Director and Co-CEO of Jackson's Lane Arts Centre, which you can see a little bit in the image that we've got up right now. So today I'm going to be talking about how local arts centres can support creative careers, as well as how I found myself in an executive director role, and the creativity that exists in organisational leadership. So if we can come on to the next slide, please. There we go. So if I start with just introducing myself properly. So my name is Hannah Cox, as I said. I've spent 18 years working in the arts and culture sector. So although I've worked across a real range of different organisations and venues, there's always been a kind of central idea to the work that I've done, and that's always been around participation. So largely working with young people, but also working with lots and lots of different community groups, using arts and creativity to give different people a voice and to help people support their own creative journey, to think about training, opportunity, representation. The kind of driving force has always been about using the arts and creativity to make inspiring and empowering opportunities, really. And I've done that in very large scale spaces and kind of much more grassroots work. So the biggest organisations I've worked in, I hope that you will have heard of, which are National Theatre and South Bank Centre, which is really fascinating because they have their kind of local London community, but they both also have national reaching programmes, which require really different ways of working. But I've also worked in kind of more grassroots organisations like schools, youth theatres, fringe theatre, quite a few customer service facing roles along the way. And I think kind of every single journey and experience I've gone on has really led me to the point that I'm in and the role that I'm in today. So over the years, I've learned a lot about how I like working. And I think that's something that it's really important for anyone within the creative careers to kind of understand about themselves, really understanding the things that drive you, that keep you energized. Creative careers are spaces. It's an industry where you can find yourself moving into different spaces, and it's not necessarily linear. It doesn't necessarily go one job after the next after the next. You can discover a new area of skill and find yourself going in quite a different direction. But these are the ideas that I've discovered are really at the heart of how I like to work, and pretty much the heart of every job I've ever done. So starting off with inclusivity. So the idea that every single person has a right to be creative, to access arts and culture, and also find their own creative voice. And really at the centre of that, a belief that our society is much stronger and much richer when that happens. More interesting things happen when different people are around the table. And the second thing is about innovation. So I love creating, I love problem solving, I love finding new ways to approach things. I get a lot of energy from working in that way. So innovation has always been in every role I've ever done, but in different ways. So whether that is thinking about new programs, finding a kind of issue or a problem and finding a new way to tackle it, or thinking about the style that we're working in, trying to do a lot of group working where people can share lots of ideas. That's kind of where I work at my best. And then finally, impact. So for me, every project, every program, every creative piece of work should consider its impact. But impact can be incredibly broad. So this might be about creating something that gives joy and creates moments of connection. Or it could be about creating a really tangible social impact, a change in your broader community. It could be about forming communities. It could be about creating a space where a really important conversation can happen. But certainly for me, that's always a question. In everything that I do, it's always a consideration. So I would say that with these ingredients, my career in the arts centre sector was inevitable, because I'm going to talk a bit about this today, but you find these three kind of ways of working are inherent in art centres and inherent in the arts centre sector. So it was a real match made in heaven for me. If we can come to the next slide, please. So what is an arts centre? And here we've got a really fantastic image that's actually from the arts centre that I run, Jackson's Lane, from our 50th birthday party that we had for our communities earlier this year. We have a brilliant juggler called Danny performing in our foyer. to a real mix of audiences, community members, people that kind of use our spaces. And I suppose I've put this in here just to illustrate how broad the arts centre sector really is. So art centres there are a few things that connect them really across the entire sector, but they are generally incredible, multifaceted hubs of culture and community. All sorts of things happen in them. They are launch pads for enormous amounts of work for individuals, for artists. They're really, really exciting places to be, but they're also meeting points for professional, non-professional, artistic, community, cultural, different ages, different groups of people. If you don't know where your local arts centre is, I'd really suggest you look it up after this session, because I certainly believe that they are bursting with opportunities, particularly for young people or people that are looking to explore the creative industries more. So a couple of commonalities between art centres, because they are quite distinct and quite individual. So they are usually multi-art form venues, which means that they will host a really wide range of performances, potentially different art forms. They might have theatre, they might have music, they might have comedy, they might have dance. And they might also host exhibitions, participatory projects. And that diversity of the offer within art centres is absolutely key, because as I said, it is all about bringing in lots and lots of different people and creating these spaces where connection can happen. Alongside these programmes, you might also find that your local arts centre has a cafe, has publicly accessible foyer spaces, has a shop, has free Wi-Fi, might have a library, could have art studios, maker spaces, studios to hire. It's really, really varied, and that is often influenced by the type of building that they're situated within, but also the need in the local area. Art centres are really responsive, they're really connected to their local community, and often their offers are heavily influenced by what's happening in their local community. They also share, because of this, really varied business models. So they likely generate their income through a wide range of sources, and that could include ticket sales, cafe sales, hiring out their spaces. We hire for artistic projects, but also weekly exercise classes, weddings, birthdays, all sorts of things. Running workshops that are paid for. They might access funding from the government, from their local council to deliver different services. They might access funding from trusts and foundations, and they might gather individual donations from their community. Really importantly, art centres play a very critical role within the broader creative sector, in particular thinking about performing arts, because they are often spaces that nurture new talent and supporting new artists, supporting new work, being a really good kind of testing ground, and often with a lot of connection with young people. So thinking about the future of the performing arts within that role. And they also contribute really significantly to their local community. So this connection and responsiveness to local need means that they will often run programs or have offers that link into what is specific in that local community. And they also help build a sense of place. So coming back to this point of connection, art centres help with placemaking, helping people feel connected, become connected, build things within the local community that will have a kind of broader purpose. They're a fantastic space for that. Next slide, please. Here we go. So I'm going to now try and apply this to the art centre that I run, which is Jackson's Lane. And here she is. You can see our beautiful building just over on the side. And remember, all those things I just said about art centres are also incredibly unique. So in different areas, you'll find different types of buildings, different types of offers, different complexities, different communities. But in Jackson's Lane, so we are situated in Haringey in North London, which is a hugely diverse borough. It's got areas that you might have heard of like Highgate and also Tottenham. It's got a really, really diverse community. We're in a grade 2 listed building. So our building used to be a church. It has had a huge amount of refurbishment over the years, so it's now an absolutely amazing art centre space, but we do have this heritage strand to our work. We are the UK's leading supporter for contemporary circus. So while our artistic programmes are diverse and we do have a range of art forms, we have a particular focus on supporting and platforming circus arts and developing circus artists. And this also ripples through some of our community engagement programs as well. We have 5 studios that we hire out for all sorts of different reasons. I mentioned a couple earlier, weekly yoga classes, after school theatre groups, weddings, birthdays. But our biggest studio has also been hired out, featured on Strictly Come Dancing and in the Eurovision Song Contest. So it's a massive range of use. We are open every single day of the week, all year round, except for bank holidays. And we have quite long opening hours. So we're open 10 in the morning till 10 p.m. all week, and then 10 till 6 on Sundays. And part of our offer is that we have a warm welcome policy. And what that means is that anyone is able to come into the centre and spend time there and not have to spend any money. And we have quite a lot of people, regular people, that will come in and they use the space, they work from there, or they just simply spend time in the arts centre because they feel really, really welcome. We reach over 80,000 people a year, of which 22,000 people are ticket buyers. And I think this is really interesting in comparing an arts centre to, for example, a theatre space. So for a theatre, the majority of their engagement will be with ticket buyers, people coming to watch a show, maybe grab food, have some drinks, head home. But for us, only a quarter of the people using Jackson's Lane are coming to watch shows in our theatre. And that means that a massive 3/4 are using the Arts Centre in a different way. So they might be taking part in our creative engagement programmes. They might be using our cafe and foyer spaces. They might be taking part in their weekly yoga class, their exercise class, bringing their kids to do after-school clubs. They might be accessing the artistic work that we do off-site within free community festivals. But I think this kind of really, really shows the broad reach of art centres and how, I guess, the versatility in what they offer. We have a turnover of £1.3 million a year, which makes us a mid-scale art centre. And our programmes, I've kind of referenced this, but they are a fusion of our artistic work, which is includes lots and lots of circus and physical-led performance, and also family theatre shows. That combines with our creative engagement work. So for young people, we have a really long-running youth circus programme. And we also do a lot of creative work that is cross-art form with older adults. And then our role as a creative hub for the local community. So coming back to that open, welcome space, and a space which hosts a huge number of externally run classes and courses, amongst our other offers. And we're also currently celebrating our 50th anniversary. So there's a really interesting history to Jackson's Lane, which absolutely informs what we do now. We were originally set up by a group of local residents who essentially spotted the potential in a boarded up church that was full of rubble. And local young people were just breaking into and hanging out. So there is a story about our founder kind of looking for a space that could hold children's provision in the local area. She saw the church, she saw young people going in. So she followed, she saw what that could be, and then she gathered brilliant people around her. And here we are today. And I just think there's an amazing lesson there to sort of take away around what happens if you have a really, really strong idea and you can gather people around you that can bring that extra energy. Actually, you can make extraordinary things happen. And for the Arts Centre to exist today, 50 years on, reaching over 80,000 people a year, having come from, that idea that day and that instinct to go and explore this unused space, I think is pretty incredible. Next slide, please. So while I've said most art centres are quite unique, and they will have a hyper-local focus, they'll really think about their local area and what's happening nearby to them, they are part of a much bigger growing sector in the UK's cultural industries, which I think is important to know in terms of how it sits alongside other sectors, theatre sectors, design sectors, performing arts. So these stats that I'm just going to rattle through were kindly pulled together by Future Art Centres, and they are an amazing strategic network that helps art centres across the UK to connect, to collaborate, and they also help us get that big picture on what's happening with art centres on a national level. So a few headlines for you. There are well over 180 art centres in the UK. So again, it is really worth working out where your nearest arts centre is. Most of them are charities. The sector has an average income of £1.66 million per arts centre, but it is worth noting that we have a few very large arts centres in existence in places like London and Manchester that will have a much, much bigger turnover. And then we have a huge number of much smaller arts centres who have a much smaller kind of turnover in the year. So it's really, really varied. Arts centres face funding challenges like most charities, and we have real challenges around the costs of running our centres. Most of us are operating with quite long opening hours. A lot of us have historic buildings which have their own challenges, but we also face a challenge around how we engage with our community, because many art centres will do work that supports challenges in the local community, maybe people that are becoming socially isolated, dealing with food and fuel poverty, health issues, and those needs currently are increasing. So there is a balancing act happening within art centres of how we ensure that our work is still doing what we need. And from an economic perspective, art centres generate £6 for every £1 of public investment, which basically means that we increase our value to our community every time that we gain financial support. They also, I've touched on this, but art centres are also really critical in supporting the development of the cultural sector. We play a really, really important role in giving space to artists or collaborating with artists to develop new work, being a testing ground for shows, work in progress shows, thinking about kind of new audiences, how people come into a cultural organisation for the first time. But we also often run projects that support specific challenges in our local area that maybe aren't arts or culture kind of areas of focus. So we certainly do this, many other art centres do this, but our work supports challenges in health, in education, in employment. So it's much broader. The importance of an art centre in the creative industries is really vital. But I think it's really important to remember that there's that interconnectedness, and it comes back to this connection and relevance for the people that use our spaces. Next slide, please. So, how can your local arts centre help you break into the creative industries? So it will be different at every art centre depending on the size and what their programme is. But I wanted to give a couple of starting points for what you could look for. So you absolutely could approach your art centre to explore work experience, opportunities, placements, or volunteering. The big thing I'd say is because art centres tend to be smaller organisations, if you access those type of opportunities within an art centre, there's a real opportunity to spend time with people who are running the programmes or running the whole organisation. They tend to be really connected. And I think the opportunity to spend time with people that are in those leadership roles and are kind of dealing with the challenges day to day is an amazing learning opportunity. It will get you very quickly to kind of nuts and bolts of how the organisation works. You might be able to access mentoring or approach staff members to become mentors. They very likely run creative programs that you could get involved in. That would be around developing new skills or building your own network with other participants, which is really important within the creative industries. You might be able to access training or leadership opportunities. And I'd use a youth board as a really good example of this. Some art centres will run extraordinary training leadership programs, and some of them will be paid. The Albany down in Deptford has an amazing example of this. But being on something like a youth board is a brilliant way to gain insight into how an organisation works, and often to have some agency in the decision making of that organisation. So it's a really good opportunity if there is something like that near you. You might be able to get paid work, so through things like front of house roles or different entry level roles. Sometimes there will be paid traineeship. And of course, it is always worth having a look at what ticket offers your local arts centre might do, because they have that real variety in their programme. They can be amazing hubs where you can access lots and lots of different types of cultural offers, performances, exhibitions, things like that. So it's a really good chance to kind of go and see lots of things and really discover what you like, what you respond to. The really big message that I want to leave with you on this is that art centres, by their very nature, are radically open places. And in my experience, that is also the same for the staff that work within art centres. Welcome and connection is really, really important. So I would just encourage everyone to go and say hello to your local art centre. Ask for a conversation to learn a bit more about what they do, or learn a bit more about what it is to work within an art centre. Because I think you're incredibly likely to find someone that says yes. And I know that I do a lot of these with people. Next slide, please. Now, I also said that I would talk about how I ended up as an executive director and CEO. And I wanted to share that I think as near as 5 years ago, I don't think I would have considered this type of job. I didn't think it aligned with the work that I'd done. So more on that in a moment. But I suppose just to start where I came from. So I went to university. I don't think you strictly need that to work in the creative industries. I think as an industry, we've become far more open and much better at recognizing the amazing value that is in people's work experience and what that brings to a role. But for me, I grew up in a relatively small town. It didn't have a big art scene. And I could see that it was going to be a really good way to help me begin that career. So that was the route that I took into it. I studied drama and English in Birmingham. I spent most of my time putting on shows. I got to the end of that degree and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to be an actor. And I knew that I was very, very interested in people, in politics, in arts and creativity. And I suppose at the very beginning of that idea of how you can use arts and creativity to make bigger societal change. So after my degree, I became a theatre facilitator and a youth theatre director. So what that meant is that I ran loads of projects with lots of different groups: children, young people, vulnerable communities, adults experiencing homelessness, always using theatre and creativity. From there, I moved into roles where I was shaping the programmes and kind of producing participatory programmes, working in really large scale organisations, which was very, very different. And then I moved from there into executive leadership, running an organisation. So currently, within my role, I oversee strategy, finance, fundraising, partnerships, operations. It's quite a big and broad spec. I would capture it by saying, in short, I make sure that we know where we're going as an organisation, why we're doing it, and that we have the right resources in place to get there safely and soundly. I said that 5 years ago, I didn't think that the role of an executive director would be for me. So I used to think, I had quite an assumption about this role, and I really thought it was maybe quite commercial, very numbers focused. I couldn't quite see the creativity in the role. I worried about how connected it felt to the programmes, having come from a background where I was working directly with participants all the time. I thought it felt quite distant. What I've actually discovered coming into this role is it's really all about the organisation. So being in an arts centre where that community and creativity and social impact is so core means that I am still connected to it every single day. But I have this wonderful new challenge where I can use all of my creativity on the kind of big picture strategy of the work. And I love it now. I absolutely love it. So I think being open to that challenge and kind of discovering new things about how you can apply your skills is really, really important. But also remembering that the shape of the organisation and the values of the organisation that you work within are going to ripple into every single role, even if it doesn't have creative in the job title. Next slide, please. I suppose this is just to briefly, it's squished on here, but this is just to briefly illustrate my point about how creative executive director and CEO roles can be. So these are just a couple of examples of the creative skills that I'm using every single day. So innovation, the ability to think about new ideas and new approaches. I've already said about how important that is for me, but I'm using that every single day in problem solving, in thinking about the organisation, thinking about how we will develop. How do we stay relevant? How do we connect to new groups? How do we stay impactful? Creative big picture thinking is a really fantastic and energizing way to move into developing strategies and to really think about long-term direction and long-term development of an organization. Curiosity I've got on here just helps us stay connected. It helps us keep things ever evolving, keeps our work feeling fresh and exciting. It's a really good thing to cultivate in other people as well. Collaboration, of course, is absolutely vital. That's the only way that you are really in the creative industries ever going to achieve anything. It's so central as a kind of pillar of what the creative industries works on, and our work is better for it. And kind of finally, storytelling. This might sound unusual, but being able to really lean into how you tell the story of an organization, how you tell the story of that work, is also how you create relationships, how you show impact, how you build trust, how you help people understand what you're doing. So I suppose from all of this, I still feel like I get to be deeply, deeply creative in what I do, but just from a different angle. On the next slide, I'm really aware of time, but on the next slide, I've just pulled out a couple of the different roles that exist within an art centre, really just to show you how broad it is and how many different ways there are to work within a cultural organisation. So we have everything from fundraising, technical, so looking after everything in the theatre, lights, sound, all of that side, marketing, hires and events, general management, which is also about looking after people. For us, it's also about looking after the building. Creative engagement, the visitor experience side, which is coming back to that welcome, and of course the roles of artistic director, executive director, CEO, which you'll find presented very slightly differently in almost any art centre, but they are all in that kind of executive leadership role. And finally, on the final slide, please, if you haven't spotted a place within this where you might see yourself connecting with your local art centre today or into the future, I think it's really important to remember that art centres have always reinvented themselves, and it's always been about meeting local need. And I just wanted to share a couple of the topics that are being explored by art centre CEOs up and down the country, which you in the future might be able to move forward. So we have digital creativity and digital technologies, their role in making work, connecting with audiences, finding new ways of doing things. Sustainability, so thinking about our environmental impact, and thinking about the role of art centres within the climate emergency. Diversity and inclusion from an art, very important across everything, but thinking about that art centre perspective of how we stay relevant, how we represent and celebrate and platform our local communities, and how we use arts and creativity to do that. And of course, the really important thing of how we ensure that these really vital community and cultural hubs thrive through investment, through sort of a business-focused strategy, and how we create partnerships and just ensure that they will survive for future generations. So that brings me to the end of your whistle-stop tour through art centres and executive leadership. But I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been interesting. And again, I would recommend that everyone goes and says hello to their local art centre today. Thank you.